This week, the United States of America turns 250 years old, a quarter of a millennium since a group of men in Philadelphia adopted a document that, had it failed, and it probably should have failed, could have gotten every one of them hanged. And I'll be honest with you, I have been thinking a lot about that anniversary. Not so much about where we are right now, because if I'm being real, I think that part's pretty easy to be cynical about. But rather about this whole thing and what it was supposed to be in the first place. What it was that we said we stood for. And whether we can still get there. So today I want to just share my heart a little bit. For those of you who are just finding this channel because of this video, this is a history channel, and that's primarily what we do here. But from time to time, I do step out and share how I see the world, how I see events that are unfolding in the context of history, and this is one of those times. I'm not here to wave a flag for a party, and longtime viewers of the channel know that I've got no problem turning a critical eye to people on the right or the left. But this video isn't about any of that. This isn't left or right. This is just me on the 250th anniversary of the birth of my country, telling you what I love about it, what I'm honest about, maybe we could be doing better, and what I'm hopeful for. You're free to take it, leave it, argue about it in the comments. I'm no important than anyone else who's sharing their opinion. But I think this one matters. So let's talk. Here's the thing about 1776 that I think we lose when it becomes a fireworks and hot dog holiday. The idea at the time was radical, genuinely radical. For most of human history, the people who ruled you did so because of who their father was. Kings, bloodlines. The accident of your birth decided everything, where you'd live, what you would do for a living, whether your voice counted for anything at all. Now, this was not the first democracy in history. It wasn't the first republic in history. But a bunch of colonists 3,000 miles from London stood up and said, people can govern themselves. Authority comes from the consent of the governed. We will rule ourselves. That was the promise that they made. And right there in the Declaration of Independence is the line that their whole experiment hangs on. That all men are created equal. That they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Now I know what you're thinking. And you're right. We didn't live up to that line. Not in 1776, and if I'm honest, not fully today. Now I'm going to come back to that. But I want us to think about how extraordinary it was at the time that they not only said those words, but they wrote them down. They put the standard on paper. They handed every generation that came after them a measuring stick. And that measuring stick has been used over and over again by people demanding that this country actually be what it claims to be. And when I think about what that promise looks like in a single human life, I think about a man who you've probably heard me talk about before, James Garfield. Garfield was born in a log cabin right here in Northeast Ohio, dirt poor. Lost his father when he was a toddler. Worked on a canal boat at a young age. And through nothing but his own tenacity and his own mind, this man became a scholar, a college president, a Civil War general, a congressman, and eventually president of the United States. A man who came from nothing and rose on the merits of his own ability. That is the promise of America. Not that everybody starts equal, we don't. Life isn't fair. But the point is that where you start doesn't have to be a sentence. That the son or daughter of nobody can become somebody. But I'm not going to sit here and just give you the varnished gift shop version of this country. Because I'm the guy who's always telling you that it is not patriotic to ignore history. It's idiotic to ignore history. So let's be honest about the 250 years as well. That same founding that gave us self-government left a whole lot of people out of the word equal. We expanded across a continent that was already somebody else's home. We held millions of human beings in bondage and wrote that contradiction right into our founding documents. There have been millions of lives who were caught in that gap between what we said we were and what we actually were. Now here's what I want you to hear, because this is the part that I think people get wrong in both directions. Acknowledging all of that doesn't make me love this country less. It's actually the opposite. Loving your country is like loving a member of your own family. You don't love them by pretending that they've never done anything wrong. You love them clear-eyed. You see the flaws, you call them out honestly, and then you love them anyway. And because you love them, you want them to be better. And here's the thing that I think the cynics miss. The genius of America was never that we were perfect, because we've never been perfect. The genius is that we have built a country with the capacity to change. A country whose own founding documents could be turned around and used to hold it accountable. Frederick Douglass did that. Lincoln did that. Martin Luther King stood on those marble steps of the Lincoln Memorial and didn't tell America to tear up the Declaration of Independence. No, he called us to finally cash the check that we had written. And that's the difference. A country that says we're perfect, don't question us, can only decline. A country that says here's the standard, and we aren't there yet, but we're going to keep trying. That country can still grow. And for 250 years, slowly, painfully, sometimes 2 steps forward and 1 big step back, we have grown. And that brings me to the thing that I actually believe. The reason I'm not a cynic, even now. I believe that people can become better than they were. And I believe that nations can too. And there's history to back that up. I talked about President Garfield. Let's talk about his vice president, his successor, Chester Arthur. You know, most people couldn't pick him out of a lineup. And when Garfield was assassinated and Arthur became president, the whole country groaned. Because Chester Arthur was a product of the machine. A crony. A guy who got his jobs through corruption and political favors. People genuinely thought, well, this is it. The spoils system just inherited the White House. And Chester Arthur, this corrupt, machine-made man, turned around and signed the Pendleton Act. He dismantled the very system that had created him. And he became the man that nobody, including himself, ever thought he could be. Greatness, in a way, was thrust upon him, and he rose to it. And if Chester Arthur can do that, if a man can become better than his worst self, then so can a country. That's not naive optimism. That is the documented, on-the-record story of this republic for 2.5 centuries. We have been, time and time again, better than we had any right to expect. So when somebody tells you it's all over, that the best days are behind us, that we are too far gone, I just don't buy it. I've read too much history to buy it. So here's what I hope. Here's what I want the next stretch of this experiment to be about. I hope we get back to valuing character over power. Garfield was a man who would do the right thing even when it cost him, even when it wasn't popular. He didn't even want the presidency. He tried to stop people from voting for him. He went into that convention supporting someone else. Compare that to the people who are clawing for power today and tell me we couldn't use a few more James Garfields. I hope we become a country that can reward that again. I hope we learn to treat the people we disagree with as our neighbors, as our fellow countrymen and women, and not our enemies. I've talked about this before, but it sticks with me. Back when Charlie Kirk was murdered, Rob Reiner, a man who disagreed with just about everything that Kirk stood for, was asked about it in an interview. And he said it was a horror, that it should never happen to anybody, no matter what your politics. That's it. We've let that muscle atrophy in this country. The ability to look at someone on the other side and still see a human being made in the image of God. And I hope we get that back. I hope that we remember that civility is not weakness, that you can disagree passionately. I say this on the channel all the time, that you can fight tooth and nail for what you believe in and still do it in such a way that brings out the best in us instead of the worst in us. That's the country that I'm hopeful for. Not one where everyone agrees. That's never going to happen. And honestly, I don't think that that's good for our country. But rather, a country where we disagree like people who still belong to each other. So I'll leave you with this. I have, by my count, at least 47 direct ancestors, great-great-great-great-grandfathers who fought in the Revolutionary War. 47. Most of them were poor, a lot of them fighting for nothing more than the promise of a piece of land and a chance at a better life for the people who would come after them. People like me. People like a lot of you. And they handed this thing down. It got handed down through 250 years, through a civil war that nearly ended the whole thing, through depressions and world wars and movements that forced us to be better. And it landed in our hands. Now, we're not the owners of this country. We're the stewards of it. We're just the ones holding it right now. And someday we'll hand it to somebody else. So my prayer, my hope on this 250th birthday is that we hand it down a little better than we found it. And that doesn't start in Washington, D.C. It never has. It starts with you and me, using whatever influence we have, even if it's just over one person in our family, or one coworker, or one neighbor, or one political opponent, to make the people around us better. That's how a republic renews itself, not from the top down, from us. So happy birthday, America. Here's to the next 250 years and to finally becoming what we said we were all along. Thanks for listening.